My name is Earl Ingram, and I was the first lieutenant at the end of the war. I volunteered for the Army in January of 1940 when I was 17 years old. I served in many different units, but when I arrived in Europe, I was assigned to the 2nd Infantry Division, and I served with the 2nd Infantry Division during my time in Europe. And I was with the 2nd Infantry Division when it arrived in the Pilsen in May of 1945. Well, I have a lot of memories from World War II since I was in, actually from January 40 until I was released from the Army in December of 45, so that's covering a period of almost 6 years. So I have a lot of memories. From a personal standpoint, I would say I met and married my wife, and that was probably the most memorable thing, but from the war standpoint of the war, the Battle of the Bulge was probably the most memorable activity or any situation that I was in. But as I said, I have many memories, and that one stands out. Well, that was a very difficult period from December of 1944 until January of 1945. And it was very difficult for all the soldiers. And many, many men were lost. And this is the thing that really stands out in my mind. Yes, I was in Normandy, but I was in Normandy after the fighting was completed. The war had been finished, I should say, not the war, but the campaign in Normandy had been finished when I arrived. I arrived in Normandy in probably the 3rd week of August of 1944, because I was a replacement. And I crossed the English Channel at night from Southampton to Omaha Beach, and I walked up landed on the beach, walked up the hill, and we moved to what was known as the replacement depot, where replacements were held. We were camped, really. And we were not too far inland, and then we kept moving because the fighting was moving. And one of the camps that I was in was, we were near St. Lo. And I remember walking up to the top of the hill one evening and looking over into the St. Lo area, and I could see St. Lo had just been devastated. And I was in a replacement depot, I guess probably between 2 and 3 weeks before I was assigned and finally reached the 2nd Infantry Division, which was just outside of Brest in early September. In fact, the Germans surrendered at Brest about 3 or 4 days after I arrived at that location. Well, the war ended for me in Europe right here in Pilsen. And I must tell you, that was a happy time. I returned to Pilsen for the first time after May of 1945. I returned in 1994. My wife and I, we drove from the German-Belgian border, and I traced or tried to follow the trail or route that the 2nd Infantry Division had taken, and that's what we did. We followed that route, and of course I arrived here in Plzeň. Yeah, well, that was the first time, and I have been now 24 times. Each time is, of course, a very happy occasion for me because I can relive the feeling that I had in May of 1945 when I arrived here. And I don't think about all the other bad experiences when I arrive here and see all the happy people.